Thanks for participating and leaving comments. This is part 2B of the audiobook, Two Worlds. This section aims to help people build understanding of how to switch worlds on command. This instructional guide is meant to help interested martial artists to better understand and navigate the choices when constructing defense strategies against a multiple attack. By the end of this part, you will have made a choice to what path you will take when facing many motivated attackers trying to down you. Enjoy. The topics in this section are more strategic. Abridged edition. The End of Martial Arts. Two Worlds. Part 2B. By Law Mun Mak. Copyright 2013 Law Mun Mak. This audio version is licensed for your personal enjoyment only. This audiobook may not be resold. Warning: it is strongly recommended that children and adults who are not experienced in martial arts should not attempt application of the principles of this book unless under the supervision of a currently certified instructor, coach in the fighting arts. My belief is that there has been other people developing similar and hopefully more effective skills than my humble attempts. My aim was to develop and expand views on how to fend off multiple attackers that will delight interested pundits and help martial artists on their journey. Please listen to previous parts to understand concepts and jargon. Giving your all. Giving your all goes without saying when facing extreme danger. It would be foolhardy to think you have a second chance against a multiple attack. It is better not to be there in the first place. One thing martial instruction gets right is environmental awareness is key to saving your butt. If you are able to avoid facing a multiple attack altogether, there would be no problem, there would be no reason to shiver in anticipation or expect pain. Everything changes for the worst when you decide to connect with the intent of the motivated attackers. Not to forget, true violence delivers no mercy to the victim, no time to prepare. In this case, it is an opportunistic assault on a chosen target and pain is inevitable. Therefore, any hesitant attempts at persuasive and deceptive arguments to worm your way out of the trap will be in vain. There will be no second chances. You are alone with a pack of hungry wolves. Only then do you wish you had not hesitated and fallen for the trap. As mentioned, your best defense arises from avoiding danger long before it unfolds in front of you. Why did you ignore the initial gut feeling telling you something was amiss? Our biggest weakness is our socialization that hampers our safety awareness. We have learnt to read marked terrains as being safe, seeing security cameras, the visible police booths, no entry signs and strategic bright lights. We are conditioned by stories of unsafe dark alleys and unsavory neighborhoods. These ideas are so pervasive in our minds that all dark spaces are unsafe and filled with opportunistic villains. Why is it not obvious violence can occur in all living spaces and when you least expect it, like in your own home? The next question: why are you the chosen target? The answers to where, when and why cannot be answered fully prior to any event. Just by watching daily news reports, nobody is spared the unexpected. It could be the confident person, the big lad with tattoos, or the defenseless person. When considering multiple attacks, the trap is designed for all types of people. Knowing the attacking group by rights has the advantage. It is important to understand socially designed safety measures are not a reason to feel safe. Guess what? Violent people ignore many of the social rules that are meant for people's safety. This reminds me of the well-coordinated assaults used by pickpocket gangs to fleece their target. They prefer to do their dirty deeds in public, where safety is expected. To come face to face with unexpected violence is still an act of hesitation and a collaboration with the attackers by accepting the proposition. The problem always lies within your own inaction. The excuse, "I did not expect it to happen," reveals the best answer to the problem. People expect safety in social situations, be it with your best friends roaming a well-policed public space or living with a friend. The idea that violent people are somebody else's problem will not highlight where the real problem lies. That is why people feel comfortable to watch the news to view violence from a distance. We feel comfortable and yet anxious by assuming we can be the voyeur and the safe bystander at the same time. Violence does not care who you are and where you are. It is solely your responsibility to build a safety response for all situations. Attackers are always lurking somewhere, but the only constant in the equation is that you know where you are. I strongly suggest, do not ignore your primitive survival instincts for a more rewarding social construct like winning. Even for the best martial artist, primed to fight of all threats, will be shocked by the lack of time to fend off many attackers in a safe way. Those dreamt-up big-hit solutions quickly come to a screaming halt due to the continued onslaught from a group hell-bent to do damage. Within moments the competent fighter will face mental emptiness, thus failing to come up with any further durable ideas to save the day. The last courageous act is to start screaming for help. In this cruel twist of reality, you find out the truth that you are all alone when you are the victim. The imagined defensive counter fades and becomes a self-collapsing view of ever-increasing losses. This idea of going, blow for blow and giving your all is tearing you apart. In desperation you sense darkness, only then do you allow the body access to the flight response, overriding expectant fight and technical effectiveness. First contact is the hopeful beginnings, but also end for most people attempting a defense against a multiple attack. In the resistance world, people just cannot let go of the first attacker until they achieve their goals of control and safety. They are just not quick enough to complete all expectant tasks and then safely move on to the next attacker, let alone escape the onslaught. The idea of trying to do your best does not cut it. For every hope, you split your attention further while submitting to the barrage. The conditioned self-defense program overloads into confusion and then turns into panic. Your desire to prove your worth is smashed, soon to act like a baby requesting safety. The situation will only get worse as the rest of the attackers want their piece of action. What is not obvious in the above descriptions is that your activation levels plummet as soon as you contact the attackers. The next warning light on your mental dashboard will be the fuel gauge flashing empty. It does not take long to gas out against many attackers. Anyone who has tried to fight off a motivated group of attackers will experience exhaustion long before you resolve the situation. The idea of giving your all during a multiple attack is based on imaginations. In truth, exponents do not even get to 50% of their fight capacity. Simply there is too much going on, splitting your attention over too many issues. Performance will drop as a result of choice overload. The solution of going berserk is a desperate attempt at nothing, but it will distract you from the upcoming painful end. The obvious is that martial schools have conditioned students for fight defense but ignored nature's design relating to other survival responses. I seldom see exercises activating the flight response scene when a person jumps back from a snake. Their focus is more on training the second response, picking up a big stick and whacking the snake for no reason. It's socially rewarding to show dominance over weaker adversaries by using excessive force under the guise of safety. Interestingly, concerned pundits are aware of our human tendency to overdo defense by reminding martial artists of the legal ramifications of excessive force. It is the art's pseudo-caveat to find appropriate force to fend off those naughty attackers. It is like asking people to stop hitting that innocent snake before following the rules. Would you have reacted differently if you had known the snake was a protected species? So, it is wise to ask, how hard should I try to defend myself when facing a life threat? If it is a life threat, there is no time to think and try, there is only do, there are no second chances. The issue plaguing the fight world's assurances are their chosen big stick solutions able to do irreversible damage. That is why the snake was beaten to death, knowing your response was in the bounds of appropriate force. Exponents are trapped in the dominance world, always fearing the unbearable loss. Confidence is held high by having access to the many ingenious techniques and weapons available for the asking, but will people carefully consider the control when the situation arises? A gun, a knife, a choke and so on are subject to the adrenaline rush from all possible users with all types of agendas. Will social rules be enough to stop them killing the snake? Then there is the conditioning from defense theater like, attack the attacker, kill or be killed, be first and so on. In the natural world, combatants respond in kind, opening the door to using all weapons, especially in those warehouse challenges. Not to forget the user of a baseball bat or a machete does not follow any rules. A group attack has no restraints on the violent use of weapons, so why would a defense artist be required to hold back? Violence will produce more violence. It is a social request as simple as striking back at the snake. This is why the energy world approaches the defense against extreme violence differently. The attackers are not seen as the issue to solve, so let them be, even with all their deadly weapons. We start by asking, why did you connect to the proposition to be the patsy for the attackers? You have allowed yourself to be stalked and attacked, like prey in the wild. Your thoughts for solutions start from the problem. You are approached by 5 aggressive people, grabbing you without warning. Now you want the answers. People in the resistance world only see problems to solve, such as you are held on the ground, then what? In the energy world, problems like this do not exist. The journey of exploration begins by not imagining you are the person being held on the ground getting beaten up, thus avoiding the social desire to find better solutions to control others and win the situation. The aim is to break the violent cycle. It takes 2 or more to tango. People are too quick to ignore that stomach-churning safety response. If acted on, would activate the flight defense response. This would make you invisible to most threats. Why? You are not there in the first place. The catch is there are no social rewards for your decision to not go out tonight. The imagined attackers are not your problem now, therefore assuming your role as a target has nothing to answer for in your current decision-making. Let's try a simple thought experiment of seeing yourself as invisible or devoid of the problem. Ask yourself, will it increase your safety and to what degree? Again, if possible, turn to safety and run long before the event grabs you. Reality is truly a simple mind trick, where flight plays always the long game with no breaks, no rest till safety is achieved. This means starting early with your awareness to avoid dangerous situations. If you are not there in the first place facing many attackers, you are invisible. But it is only human nature to imagine the impossible problem to justify your fears. This is why pundits will ask obvious short-game questions like, what if you are grabbed, held down or trapped in an alley? Ouch, no doubt that is going to hurt. It is the socially conditioned person that gets pleasure imagining they are trapped in an impossible problem and then pick it apart in slow motion looking for step-by-step answers. This is what drives martial artists to spend a lot of time perfecting counter-solutions. Sometimes I wonder if martial artists are aware they are dealing with an infinite number of problems. It is this very attitude that makes the group attack the impossible problem to solve. In the energy world, the learning is personal, while value extraction comes from developing self-efficacy. It is understood that you are alone when facing a violent multiple attack, so it would be wise to see what one person can do in the moment to avoid an infinite number of problems. As with jumping back from a snake strike, the answers to most real-life violent experiences happen instantaneously, leaving no time for technical solutions. Giving your all is a desperate measure after the horse has bolted. You are in the midst of battle and realize your head is about to be knocked off, only then you somehow decide to go harder and faster. But in a group attack, extra exertion is meaningless unless you can outrun the attackers. To think means to grab onto, to focus means to target, both trapping you into the battle against any attackers. You are not going anywhere until you decide to disengage. Time lost and energy wasted are the curse of trying too hard. Using the berserk button makes no sense as it only makes bees even more angry. It should be called the pain button. If you decide to stand and fight, what do you really think will happen? It is a sure way to make your day exponentially worse. As suggested, giving your all does not indicate self-control or a clear mind to see and consider the truth of the situation. It is the impossible problem to fight. It boils down to your personal need to lock onto resistance and prove a point. The smart pundit would have wanted to be invisible long ago to avoid the inevitable. The 2 basic principles suggested by the energy world is to keep moving and avoid connecting with resistance, that is the attackers. To answer the what-if question means you failed to apply the principles on both accounts. To stand and listen and look and consider takes up precious moving time. Pundits in the resistance world need you to stand there in their mental mud and fight for proof. For what, I do not know. So, does the person who hesitates have a chance at all? Self-realization and self-concept are hard precepts to fathom in a society pumped full of expectations. What would it be like to face a person who has no desire to control or destroy anyone? The proposition to fight or solve a problem gains no traction. Technical posturing sparks no counter-response, thus, it is unnecessary baggage for what really is a non-existent fight. This is as good as waiting for the sound of one hand clapping. The energy world does not force connection between people. Those much-loved and effective weapons always need somebody else to be the victim to claim glory. It is good to reset the reality button when facing the impossible problem, knowing when the attackers are better resourced, have more fuel and more firepower than you could ever come up with. Alternatively, for your mental protection, you could consider seeing yourself as a much smaller target, with limited strength and skills to defend yourself from a marauding group. It does not take a genius to sense a bad ending if you are willing to jump in and take on many attackers. This is when your imagined defense strategies really become a pipe dream. There must be more than the eye-for-eye attitude driven by the one-on-one fighting world. To counter those overinflated imagined defense strategies, the energy world utilizes close-to-real pressure testing to iron out less than effective defensive ideas. It is not uncommon to hear exponents with reputation say, "If I really let go of my skills, you all will be done." In reply, the advice is, do what you want to do. It is a pressure test, aiming to be close to real. The group attack testing ground does not discriminate. Everyone has a right to test what they like. Knowing this is the best way to help people to learn from close to real resistance. This is what helps to develop the self-driven individual to become accustomed to real-time decision-making relating to safety. It is like trying to understand how a rat can scurry away from a bunch of hungry cats. The rat has no intention to waste time to take on each cat with its two front teeth. So, the focus on self-development in the energy world does not follow the martial artist's everyday way of thinking. Those favored techniques in the natural martial world needs lots of individuals to fight back to highlight and iron out weaknesses, always aiming to produce the best possible counter to resistance. The energy world differs by utilizing many motivated attackers with lots of resistance all directed at you at the same time to pressure you to iron out realities with one's beliefs and chosen strategies. The aim is to trigger a full-on response, like flight, utilizing the effects of speed related to the one system. The catch for martial artists is, it is very hard to visualize prior to an actual multiple attack exercise. This leaves many exponents in limbo, knowing traditional methods of planning technical ways for victory and dominance go out the window. The big difference to the fight world is, the energy world's test to sharpen skills is a group of motivated attackers encouraged to do what it takes to down the target as fast as they can. Newcomers soon become aware the world around them is constantly moving and changing, thus closely mimicking the chaos of reality. This realization is bolstered by a huge shift in focus from the opponents being the problem to seeing the self as the only person that counts. The attackers are the stimulus to give your all to the self, not the attackers. This self-preservation attitude is not found in the fight world, which is trapped by the anticipation and expectation of overcoming the presenting resistance with some proven magical techniques. In the energy world, your choices have to be immediate in nature. No different to a survival response that suggests you leave immediately, always knowing that it would have been better to leave the threat alone long before being grabbed. It is a tough realization to find out there is no time to look for other people for help. You are alone, needing to break connection with the threat to somehow outrun the grasp of the attackers. All the social considerations are suspended to make way for more efficient responses, driving the escape velocity from the presenting resistance. I wonder what your newfound choices will be to find the path of least resistance to get to safety. Measuring responses. When threatened or in danger, we look for advantages by measuring the opponent's responses and weaknesses. It is built into our natural conditioning to take stock of an unfolding situation to make timing choices for an attack or retreat. The key point here is everyone is measuring something. Measuring relates to when, where and how your responses will unfold. The glaring problem with this natural skill of assessing an up-and-coming attack is you are connecting to a specific moment in time and space. This is not good for entering the energy world, where the advantage is consistency of movement and never to connect with anything with intention. Measuring unfortunately fits into the triad of fear, that is anticipating, expecting and hesitating before deciding to move. In the energy world, you want to take stock of as much as possible, seeing the world moving around you and not at you as a target. The aim is to have no intentional connections to any object or anything around you. As soon as your vision locks onto that kick, punch and takedown attempt, you have to slow your progress, lose valued speed, all because you spent time measuring something. Now the group has more time to measure you and quickly down you. Taking stock of every attack is impossible, but to monitor one's own situation is doable. This means measuring your behavior for weaknesses pertaining to the energy world. We are all measuring devices with our senses and comparative stored experiences. We get those intuitive feelings that indicates when a situation is either safe or dangerous. We like to think we are clever enough to make the right decisions when it counts from our conditioned solutions. Then there is the ego, which gives us the go-ahead to demonstrate superiority within our social enclave. But this does not apply when facing a group attack. The tools to measure up-and-coming success fails beyond the first attacker. Again, I will reiterate that measurement of responses focuses on the up-and-coming execution of technical strategies like strikes, tackles, or a takedown. It is an important requirement to compete in a fighting context by effectively knowing when, where, and how to disrupt the opponent's defenses. Measurement is a personal skill that will help you score well in competition. You prepare the groundwork to execute a very specific series of moves to obtain the superior position over your chosen opponent. This is best described as planning for future success over an opponent. The skill of measurement does not correspond to what the energy world views as what is needed to overcome a group attack. Measurement and timing skills obtained on the training floor are detrimental to chaotic, rapidly changing, and time-strapped situations like a multiple attack. The many prepared responses never get off the ground because measurement does not eventuate. The alternative is to keep moving by suppressing the intent to do harm. This will allow your senses to work at their most efficient. The effect is you do not have any fixed focus, which allows you to move at speed, where all your responses are constructed in real time. Those slow planned and conditioned responses are replaced with life-saving movements that keep you moving under pressure. It is our reliance on conditioning that locks us onto the first attacker, stalling progress, reducing mental flexibility to a focus, hindering the ability to move through a group of attackers freely. Lost continuity, stalled progress. We are socially conditioned to stand our ground and fight one attacker at a time. Our biggest gains in social status are a consequence of intentionally holding each person to account for their intrusive aggressions. It is only natural to compete and lock horns. The consequence in each case is you cannot disengage when you want to, thus stalling progress onto those bigger picture issues of a multiple attack. The energy world is all about one's continuity of movement, meaning you are never slowing for another's attempt to control you. The aim is to maintain speed from the beginning to the end of the event, never slowing or stopping to deal with the traps set by the attackers. Stalling your progression means you have decided to stop by aiming to fight one attacker at a time. The real advantage that comes from maintaining the continuity of motion is you never engage any of the attackers. This redefines your social role as a problem solver for others. You do not become the anxious victim of other people's intent to do harm. The attackers now have no choice but to change their perceptions of their expected outcomes of winning the situation. The value of maintaining continuity of motion is it reduces the opponent's attention and intent of trying to get you under control. It stops you seeing yourself as the victim. The impression from the attacker's point of view is seeing you as a much smaller target. This has been referred to as reduction, described as increased focus on what the attackers cannot have, that is your consent to be the target. They have lost the advantage of numbers and firepower. You have become independent of the social grabs, now moving at speed as a small target, leaving the attackers to consider many lost opportunities to down you. The overall response for the attackers is hesitation, something a group attack would be unfamiliar with, hence stalling their collective intent. What continuity of motion offers is you do not need to waste time looking for a counter to head off attackers' plans, effectively reducing the attackers' choices. What becomes the impossible mental simulation for fighters is the idea of not using your arms and legs as weapons. They are used as a way of maintaining your speed of progression and not as defensive tools aiming to connect with attackers. As soon as you focus on a technique, your progression has to slow in preparation to fight. This is what the resistance world has to do to prove their point and show their dominance. When moving in a continuous way, there is no desire to lead with any arm, hands, head or feet, as this would disrupt speed of progression to an exit. Principally, you have split the one system if you target anyone when moving at speed, resulting in stalled progress to a safe exit. By reverting to using techniques for defense means your drive forward as one system has to be hindered, allowing the attackers time to measure you and down you. The likelihood of you becoming stationary in a sea of attackers is extremely high when you desire a connection. Why is speed of progression so important? It is not what the attackers are anticipating. They are expecting you to slow for impact, increasing their chances to rush you for a takedown. It is always about grabbing you to slow your escape velocity to help other attackers in your demise. Another value of speed is it bends the attacker's vision, forcing them to stand still to track your progress. A bit like standing there, visualizing the trajectory of a ball thrown in the air to catch it. Being a small target strategy, bending the attack is what allows the small rat to scurry effectively away from the hungry cats. The cat's responses appear half-hearted as they tentatively stretch out their paws in the path of the rat's speedy progress. Bending the attack disrupts vision that measures the timing of the offense. As always, I welcome people in the defense world to try their hardest to solve the impossible problem of a multiple attack. The real secret to the energy world strategies is to accept there is no fightback to consider when moving freely. It is like the attack is not taking place when facing superior firepower of a group attack. The more socially orientated the attackers are, the more they stand there looking dazed waiting for the stimulus to act as expected. While a violent group attack will never give you a warning, but I am sure it would be a big surprise to them when you have acted early to achieve safety. The social attack and the violent attack are both dangerous simply due to numbers, but in both cases, they need a cooperative victim. But if you slow to check your safety, they still could chase you down and do their worst. The smallest target is not to be there in the first place. When caught in the trap, your commitment is always directed to speed, meaning you have no intention to connect with the group's aggressive propositions. Fighting back stalls continuity and progression and makes you more visible to the attackers, now becoming the stimulus for a feeding frenzy until your demise. Your only task is to stay unconnected and unattached to all forms of presenting dangers. If you find your mass entering the attacker's flak zone, your drive has to be flight, not fight. Even a momentary defensive move is a split from the one system by having to connect with the attacker. Once connected, it takes too much effort and time to disengage, now knowing you never be able to return to speed and find safety. Currently cultural norms are accepting that attackers can carry all sorts of weapons to make the group attack even more impossible to defend against. Weapons make the encounter a nightmare problem for nearly all martial arts approaches. It is even more concerning, weapons give power to the opportunist who stands aside and then rushes in on your blind side, doing their worst, only to run away never to be seen again. The energy world considers these cultural and societal changes as being important and gives further credence not to be there in the first place. The brazen attack from opportunists has become the norm, and to think there is just a fight would be naive. It is important to ask how you can become invisible to the attackers and not be seen as that easy target. When you are presented with a group attack, I ask you, what is important to you when you have already let the attackers defeat you on odds and weapons? Knives and guns have strong social statements to grab your attention, so there is no reason to think they will not be there. Even if you are armed, the question remains, whose weapons will do the most damage to life? At no time should you stand there and consider facing armed attackers. This is a far cry from the one-on-one way of defense, a concept based on social rulings to see who can take the prize. The important lesson here is that you don't wait to be distracted by any one attacker wanting to do harm. This can only be achieved when you are self-driven, a state of having no social needs. It's a time when you do not want to interact with people in any way. If you can avoid the clutches of a motivated group attack, you have not stood still and forfeited your freedom to live another day. It is our natural world that drives us to find better solutions to achieve control over others at the cost of everyone's freedom. It would be nice to think there were no problems in the first place. Therefore, the most effective response is achievable by simply making a decisive decision long before the attack takes place. This is better referred to as situational awareness. As good as this could be as a defense strategy, we are social beings that are attracted to everything on offer, be it good or bad for us. We are socially bound to stick our necks out there and have a look at the danger zone. It's why we rubberneck to look at car accidents and fights on the street. At no time do we consider disconnecting and let the world unfold without attention. We do not want to miss out on anything, referred to as FOMO, the fear of missing out. The fear of missing something important when it is not, is such a curse in the energy world. Therefore, the aim is to keep moving no matter what, which means staying disconnected from presenting social traps that are intended to grab your attention away from your own progression. In the energy world, everything has to be happening on your own terms. As soon as you sense a social or physical grab, you accelerate to where you are free from any engagement. This does not mean we run 2 meters and turn and check if that was enough to break the connection. There are no social checks in the energy world or half-hearted attempts when playing the long game. All you want to do is disappear to avoid connections. To hesitate means you are involved in an internal mind simulation to find the right solution for an immediate problem. This occurs even when you are just an onlooker to a violent attack. The urge to take control always occurs when looking at an event. We want to learn to dominate as many situations as possible by watching how events unfold. For our personal defense, we want foreknowledge to plan our wins in the most comfortable way possible. An important task in the energy world is to avoid the social urge to win, instead to keep moving at speed, looking to disconnect from all objects until there is no threat anymore. To connect to the dangers would mean you will have to stop and consider fighting and a new plan. To be involved with an attacker needs one-to-one communication, where connection and intent are exchanged, while not attending to the dangers of other incoming attackers. It is no wonder that socially conditioned people are blind to the most basic instinct of flight. The social instinct is to always fight, be it passive or aggressive, aiming to win the prize. In the energy world, the student has to become aware of flight as a first-line defense strategy that is faster and more efficient than a fight. Flight is not a stopgap solution against a group of motivated attackers. It appears to be a wise choice to avoid the impossible problem. Socially, we are taught to fight first. Every situation has to be seen as a competition where there is only one winner. Where a win-win outcome is really a bunch of compromises to temporarily keep the peace. It is no wonder why we hesitate. Nobody can really be sure they know the enemy enough to stand there and ask for peace. So, we arm up just in case to compensate for any disparity in the peace agreements. Therefore, I teach students there is no need to hesitate and feel like an imposter when there is no fight to consider in the first place. There comes a time when you are pressured to face the social battlefield and play the proposed game. It is where the bigger, better and faster has the best chance to come out in front. Interestingly, it would seem to be the impossible solution to ask people to disconnect from societal games. Even worse, we spend a lifetime to become socially organized to plan a strategy against all forms of competitors. So, to live in the world of the disconnected would mean coming to terms with being free from competition. Moving one's mass at speed is a whole new way on conceiving the world around you when facing aggressors. I am sure it is also confusing to the unsuspecting attackers. A social connection always needs recognition to complete the union so a fight can begin. In the energy world, no union, no fight. I am sure attackers are confident to view their position as being dangerous and you are the victim to be wiped out. But to see a person moving at speed in a continuous manner must be a weird experience that asks for a very different offense. What the attackers see is a person moving at speed and not the disengagement being played out at their expense. If a bet had to be laid, the attackers will win the day. Think again, the example of the rat darting around trying to find an exit, and yet the rat may have a good chance to avoid the hungry cats. Speed changes everything, making the cat's response less viable. In this case, there is no one-on-one fight to make the situation competitive. It is a good example of flight against insurmountable odds. It is not perfect, but it can save a life against the worst. It is not just running from the attackers, as that is a connected strategy. Simply a runner always checks their progress by turning back and having a look, allowing the attackers to catch up. It is more like being a racing car driver trying to get ahead of the next driver all the time, rather than seeing who is in the review mirror. The draw card is to be first over the finish line, and who cares who is left in your wake. The problem for conditioned fighters is that they are drawn to the attacker giving them the most attention, waiting there with arms out ready to give the best counter. In the energy world, continuity of motion is the way to avoid fighting and outrun the attacker's intent to counter. The aim being to avoid being held back and to cross the finish line first. The fastest and freest response is flight, that is nature's way to avoid connection with a dangerous competitor. Winning relies on connection and a fight. The more you force an attacker to engage in your plans to win, the more you consummate the relationship to fight. A group encounter is a situation you really do not want to connect with. It plays the short game, clearing the way for an easy win. To switch worlds. It is much easier to stay in the resistance world, that is the natural world we spend the most time in. The energy world requires a change of perspective for only a short period of time that allows you to see the world as moving. This is achieved by never standing still, always moving at speed through a world based on resistance. From the energy world perspective, everything appears to continually change, like the flow of vision moving in front of you when driving a car. Better still, the energy world feels like it moves all around you and you have no intention to control it or target anything. The big difference is you do not want to slow and focus on any single object of interest before moving on. You could say, there is no time to smell the roses. The resistance world always better fits our sense of needing control over future events. That means we want full control of how much time we spend preparing and targeting things we desire, like aiming a gun at a target. This is how techniques are developed by imagining the target being hammered prior to its execution. It all works well in the resistance world, becoming that repeatable technique that can effectively whack people in the head or take your opponent down at will. It is the status quo in the martial arts world where artists are very happy they can envisage the techniques working before, during and after execution. The mindset is not too dissimilar to chess play, where strategies are mentally stimulating, giving you a mind's eye view of every strategic move. Every move has a start and defined outcome, making you very aware to set your opponent up to be the patsy. The technical world has turned out to be socially acceptable and competitively profitable. It is the martial arts way. Whereas the energy world relies on your sense of freedom as the guiding force, identified by your freely moving footwork and your unrestricted vision. This can only occur if you disengage from any social request to participate in some game. It is when you stop moving freely you are increasing the likelihood to be attracted back to the natural world to play with resistance. To stop means connection and you are going nowhere. It is what the attackers are wanting to gain your full attention and submission. As school kids we are conditioned to stand there and listen and fall prey to suggestions, like the idea to have a fight. You have succumbed to the social grabs. The resistance world wants people to follow social rules. Now the lines can be drawn and the games can be played. It is difficult to lose the game if you attract a right type of socially organized patsy. People who want to investigate the energy world do not get the winning feeling by switching to this world. Also made worse by knowing there are no expected thoughts of getting a pat on the back for a job well done. In the natural world a person's inner senses are generally dominated by the resistance world, and it is taboo not to reflect on the rule-based social game plays. So, it is only natural that we have been programmed to need to beat others for social accolades that are essentially self-fulfilling. All achievable by the displays of obsessive behavior, aiming for social perfection, simply by repeating exercises until performances are unquestionable. While people entering the energy world cannot stand still for any social praise, meaning training is based on disconnection from the situation to maintain freedom from social grabs. Simply if you are not there, you cannot be grabbed or persuaded. It does not feel natural to not be present for a problem that everyone else sees and wants to solve. In your mind it is not a matter of what if, it is all about do. The act of doing is very personal and needs a clear vision of self-determination that is not distracted by a magic trick and feeling like an imposter. You want to feel free from social judgments. Again, I say, if you want to win the situation, stay in the resistance world. It is designed for competitions. While nature's battle for survival is the opposite to any social game, the idea is to be invisible to predators. Escape is always about environmental awareness, not being engulfed in a sense of safety set by social rules. In my mind the energy world is a better choice when moving through a world of social predators wanting to grab you for their own benefit. Socially, profit always before safety. A group attack is but a concentration of social predators ready to do harm at another person's expense. It is a choice of fighting or evading the insurmountable problem, as there is no single person out there who can control the onslaught of a group attack. With this in mind, can the two worlds coexist in a world dominated by the resistance world? Yes, they can, but as opposite sides of a coin. It is one or the other, but not at the same time. This does not compute well for people in the natural world always trying to find advantage with uncovering new tricks. The energy world is just another way of operating in the natural world, by avoiding the urge to lock onto or connect with resistance. It is like wanting to be the good professional doing your best for people and then you make a snap decision to have nothing to do with people and their needs. The energy world is easily accessed if you escape the social trap of engaging with people's proposals. You can change in an instant from a happy helping person to a person who wants to be invisible. The condition dilemma is you want to win the game, but you cannot do it by not playing the game. The two worlds are closest during the game of life, where time is your enemy and the predator has the ultimate advantage. You switch to escaping the trap, as you did when jumping back from a striking snake. Predation is a violent game where no one is pronounced the winner or showered with social accolades. While most social propositions of self-defense require some knowledge of the attackers to develop a confident counter, it is always about the win. When it comes to a violent threat to life, it is best not to be there in the first place, encapsulated by situational awareness. The issue that needs careful assessment is life can be taken in a blink of an eye. There are no proposed preambles during a life threat. Hence, there is no chance to bullshit your way through a situation by acting on instructed choices. It is the imposter in you that makes you stand there and defend your ego that wants a win. Nobody wants to fight and lose. It is probably having everything to do with being caught out and then not having anything to skite about. Yes, the most frightening group attack will have weapons in it, but people are more frightened of not performing and succeeding against violent attackers. Again, I will assert the first problem to solve is you. It is all our social conditioning that drags us into challenging the attacking group in the hope one's training is sufficient to come out on top. The danger is not realizing the group is the unsolvable problem and any intention to engage is not a wise choice. Somehow you got the idea that giving everything you got may save the day, or it is your best chance of survival. The issue is your conditioned social need to engage, your attraction to gaining bunny points for controlling the situation even when it makes no sense. What is even worse is your inattention to the wider and bigger problems still descending onto your location. In addition, you do not care if you have a narrowed focus in the attempt to win small victories aiming to curtail an avalanche of violence. In the natural world you feel like an imposter, not able to suppress social habits to save your life. The choice to disengage has been blanked out in a mental sea of defensive mud. The resistance world is a fly trap for its followers, focusing people on being that well-trained martial artist that loves attacking others and fighting. It is only natural to lock onto resistance if you want to be the controlling force and dominate the situation. This means you plan to win the game at any cost, so what are the other choices out there? It is hard to avoid the resistance world when it is the social fly trap, with its tricks to take control of all the presenting self-defense knowledge. The best one-on-one tricks are the preemptive strikes and double-leg takedowns. They have proven to be effective and easy to set up as a social trap, starting with a question like, "Do you want to fight?" and then boom. It is using a simple question that enhances social connections and inattention. This is the easiest way to set up the ideal trap in the natural world, by selecting and connecting to the naive patsy. A social fight is really about who has done more preparation to win than the next person. The aim is to be over-prepared, by ensuring you are in control of your deception, by secretively training extensive hours, testing skills and making sure you are better than your target. The loser must be the intended fool in the equation of the social game. The preemptive fight is where both parties accept the playing field where two people face off for the ultimate test, which meets the expectations of the wider fighting community. As a reminder, there is no social expectations when you are jumping back from a striking snake. It only gets social attention on the second response, that is picking up the big stick to kill the snake. Just as a reminder, you will need to be good at deception to win against a multiple attack focused on a win. Your protective sense of freedom is only found when social conditioning loses its importance, occurring in rare situations like jumping back from a snake. In the energy world, a person is required to disengage from societal controls to be able to act with freedom of thought that will keep them moving away from resistance. A sure sign you are caught in the social fly trap is you need to judge others. Measuring a person's aggressive moves will happen more in the moment for a defensive assessment aiming for advantage. If you measure the situation as being dangerous, you are trapped in the resistance world looking for solutions. In the energy world, we need to exit naturally conditioned social mindsets by switching from fight to flight, moving your intentions from engagement to finding a safe exit. So, the attacking group is not seen as a problem to solve by using force for a situation where nothing needs to be controlled and manipulated. The urge to get involved is nothing less than a connection that will stall your decision to escape in time and find safety. I have alluded to this so many times, this switch in our mindset can only occur if you maintain focus on moving at speed to an exit. What is hard to understand, the situation now unfolds because of your actions, not the group's. It is like driving, the car responds to you. Freedom from connection allows you to drive your body in space where you want to go, taking the path of least resistance, otherwise you will crash. To engage others means you will connect and feel the full force of impact. This does not make sense against many attackers, the maths is against you coming out on top. What you really would like when facing extreme danger is to make the attackers faceless so you can avoid making your life miserable. The energy world encapsulates a switch in mindset, which is available to all of us given the right circumstances, like a survival situation. Naturally, we live in the resistance world with all its propositions. The energy world, being the opposite side of the same coin, firstly confuses people by its move away from the expected gameplay. Now the game is yours and does not require the aggressor to play. The energy world has such a pedigree that most the martial arts world will find little value in its offerings to help the current batch of highly competitive super martial athletes. The energy world values the long game, relying on one's own internal gameplay long before the event and long after it. Its aim is to disconnect you from social distractions like winning the game, thus quietening your internal chatter needing to control aggressive resistance. It is like an unemotional car that is already moving. You can only accelerate up to speed and not have any intent to bump into any object. The faster you can accelerate, the less time you will spend thinking about connecting to objects. The fast-moving car is simply a vessel full of energy that takes us to the next safe place, so to speak. Gaps in defense. Currently, martial artists are conditioned to see and seek an opponent's defensive gaps so a counter-offense can be effectively slipped in. When it comes to dealing with multiple attackers, the more concerning gap is inattention. This is a mind gap, so prevalent that people are essentially not aware of it until they watch a magician deceive their attention by the clever construction of their tricks. Mental distraction should be the far more concerning problem for all people learning self-defense. We train so hard to be physically perfect, while leaving huge mind gaps in our attention. The physical gap and the mind gap are related, but each one causes the other. Whatever the gap, it is of advantage to the person who finds it and uses it first. The attraction to finding a hole in people's defenses is at the forefront of every encounter a martial artist will face. A gap in defense makes the offensive battle much easier. It is the natural way to find advantage when facing a defensive wall. The issue is the physical encounter takes up most of the time, attending competitive strategies to win the social battles. It is like looking at a chessboard trying to calculate the next few moves to checkmate your opponent. This intense focus on a narrow playing field has to leave you vulnerable to an unexpected strike outside the gameplay. The opportunists love to stand there waiting for a moment's inattention when the player's thoughts are solely focused on the next few moves. This is when the bigger picture dangers disappear of the attentional screen due to over-focusing. The effect is mental blindness due to narrowing of focus. This was demonstrated so effectively by the invisible gorilla experiment. Check it out on the net. Simply, you cannot be attending to all changes happening around you when your focus is on taking out one target. This is how people in public situations get fleeced from seeking safety first, by a clever aggressor using a focusing proposition like, "Do you want to fight?" question, boom, you are gone. These simple disarming distractions are going to be harder to apply when you face multiple attackers. Firstly, you better not focus just on one attacker, unless you want to be sideswiped by another attacker taking advantage of your inattention. Secondly, there is no time to focus on mental and physical disarming tricks directed at each attacker. The reality is that everybody is staring down on you, ready to swoop as soon as you lose focus on the larger group. The gap is easily identified when you stand there internalized searching for solutions. This is why it is easy for the attackers to flank you with ease. It is a shame that many training programs do not promote the dangers of inattention by using the flanking attacker. This is a huge gap in the minds of instructors that fail to mentally simulate beyond the one-on-one attack. They ignore the fact as soon as you focus on one attacker, you cannot be attending to any of the other attackers bearing down on you. If you are standing hesitating, contemplating the one attack, the group will take advantage of the huge mind gap left by your super focus. As mentioned before, you cannot step forward and solve one problem at a time. It is all about taking stock of the dangers unfolding all around you in real time. Your safety will be in jeopardy if you intend to fight each attacker one after another. Ideally, you would have done well to accelerate up to speed at the first signs of danger, escaping the need to battle any one attacker. This could be as simple as turning and running at speed before the group had time to gain your attention. In the energy world, the aim is to never acknowledge the attacker's intent. The beauty of moving at speed away from a potential ambush, your attention is never fixed on any one thing, leaving you free to dart and scoot away from any potential up-and-coming resistance. Therefore, there is less of a chance of being inattentive to surprises. Simply, you become the surprise. What causes the trouble is our need to fix our focus on one thing at the expense of moving rapidly across an ever-changing landscape of dangers. Ask yourself, can you defocus before you apply a defensive move from your arsenal of techniques? The truth is you will never have enough time to apply techniques while holding a fixed focus and still be able to attend to the unexpected attacks from the group. You would be as blind as the bowman fixated on a target. The cornerstone of any defense strategy is to mentally bind the opponent's attention to get past their defenses and take them out. The challenge here is multiple attackers need to be affected as a group, not as a series of individuals. This is not so far-fetched as it may seem. The group is a social collective ruled by social constructs that are vulnerable to inattention. As mentioned, the group is aware they cannot lose against one person. The collective advantage of the attackers is paper-thin and fragile because the group exists only if the event unfolds as expected. The aim for any person being targeted by a group is to affect the enemy by taking advantage of the mental holes in all the attackers' collective attentions. This is done by doing something unexpected that turns social rules and gameplay on its head. Like all socially organized statements, there are rules to follow. If broken, people hesitate to look for excuses for having been caught out and then blame others. Defense starts off always with your awareness of being vulnerable to social rules. We are trapped in a continuous need to solve other people's problems. The simplest of questions will take your focus by your need to come up with solutions, which takes all your attention. Simply, we are trapped by every verbal exchange. From the attacker's point of view, your focus on the problem means all is going to plan, boom, you are gone. We are socially conditioned to argument and defense. The ego urges us to enter full-scale battle only to be sideswiped by an opportunistic attack. The social grab is unavoidable in the resistance world, leaving people mesmerized and open to being taken out. If only you remained free from connection by initially following that gut feel of impending danger, immediately removing yourself from any urge to engage and fight. Attachment is the natural social way to be human. You are conditioned deep down to attend to all propositions, leaving huge defensive gaps in your attention. I ask you, where has your sense of freedom gone? Mental darkness. Do not be scared of mental darkness. It is not the fighter's curse. The traditional way to create mental darkness is to hit a person hard in the head and watch him back off to reload the courage tanks. It is certainly a period where thinking will stop, leaving a hole in the attacker's defenses. In a group encounter, this would be a great opportunity to swamp the victim with ease. Other methods of shocking the mind into darkness could be a loud scream, a rapid combination of strikes, a flash of light, a bang of a gun, or something like pepper spray. The aim in all cases is to deactivate the attacker's mind for a period time, stalling all offensive capabilities no matter how well trained or aggressive the attacker wants to be. It is the great leveler, giving hope to all people wanting to learn to be self-defense artists. Like all tricks, it can also be used on you. To be forced into mental darkness can be scary when receiving an array of blows to your head. The inner turmoil, the fear and anger does not make you feel effective in your quest to win the situation. It is a crucial time and probable turning point to how effective your defense will be. Traditionally, tricks like driving your opponent into mental darkness helps a person become overtly confident when facing a challenging situation. This helps you avoid experiencing the negativity of mental darkness created by the initial impact. As many experienced fighters point out, you have to experience being hit a few times hard to experience the fear of mental darkness before stepping out into real battle. Mental darkness is not your enemy, it's an inconvenience that needs to be understood. The initial sense of losing control after being hit is never completely removed from your battle experiences. A common response is to cover your head by bunkering, giving you time to recover until your anger returns, driving you back into the battle amidst a burst of adrenaline. The discussion so far is how the resistance world tends to wait for darkness to lift before a counter-offensive is delivered to overcome their opponent. The best darkness strategy is to knock out your opponent with one hit. The martial way is to make people feel vulnerable by hitting hard with the expectation the opponent will be pressured into mental darkness, becoming defenseless, easy prey. Much of the darkness points to vulnerabilities of the human mind. As living creatures, we need our mind to be clear to access immediate responses when experiencing threats. This instinct is crucial to complete an effective evasion from the claws of death. It is understandable martial exponents will need ample time in public arenas to gain experience to handle darkness. During my discussions so far, I have alluded to that we know very little about the attackers in the group and even less about the self. People who delve into the energy world will have to be better acquainted with the self to avoid being a social response. Simply, fear is imaginary, thus anticipatory, by avoiding the obvious that one's thoughts of the event has not happened yet and probably will not eventuate ever. Internal imaginations can become crippling by conjuring up mental monsters. There has to be no compromises in the energy world when it comes to the self. You cannot put a foot in both worlds to find advantage. You are either in the resistance world or you are in the energy world. You cannot plan to use both worlds at the same time. What is common for both worlds is everyone wants to be free of danger. Apart from the ideal, people in the natural world want to drive into danger solely to get a sense of winning. The energy world wants nothing to do with dominating the event, aiming to find freedom by avoiding the situation in the first place. In truth, there are no heroes to be created when the resistance is insurmountable. It is no wonder that most people's impressions of defense against resistance is based on fear, especially when thinking about an armed group attack. Safety becomes a set of disrupted thoughts when you imagine a fight against the impossible of a group attack. Everybody wants to take control of the situation as quickly as possible, as this is what is expected from our social conditioning. The prospect of losing control of a well-motivated group of attackers with weapons has to be front and center in all defense artists' minds. By the time you have tested your first techniques, the group has already slammed into you and left you thoughtless. That is scary. The reason a socially conditioned person is so vulnerable is their need to interact with the attackers to prove a point and win the situation to find safety. The time it takes to internalize your plan and then activate to rush in affects both you and the first attacker the same way. Both you and the attacker go dark beyond sensical. It is this ignorance of this other form of mental darkness as a normal part of the fight process will drive your fear up even higher, forcing you to try harder next time when attacking. It is your way to suppress the mental mud of anticipatory pain, triggering a dark period, a mental safe space where fear cannot hold you back from the fight. Any plan is likened to attacking yourself from the attacker's perspective, to find a modicum of advantage over the attacker's presentation. You rush in, do your thing and then stop, then check your imagined plans have been effective, losing all your senses of the actual attack and progression onwards. The use of mental darkness in the fight world is poorly understood, and yet it happens for every planned insertion into the fight. Hitting somebody hard is endemic in the minds of fighters to create advantage during mental cessation, creating enough time to come in quickly and pummel the opponent. Strangely enough, mental darkness also occurs during every attack, leaving one side the opportunity to use the gap to continue the attack. What most defense approaches fail to calculate for their treasured on-the-floor demonstrations is the immense pressure a group attack places on the victim's mind. Going dark is inevitable for the target if they intend to attack. The consequences for the target are not very pleasing, becoming the trigger for the quick rise for the group's motivation to attack. There is close links between our social conditioning and mental darkness when under life threats. It feels like having an imminent collision with another car. No way to control the situation, therefore no chance to avoid the worst from the reckless driver. What can be done to create safety will be hard to envisage. The slowing and recession of the world rolls in as an ever-increasing darkness of your life-saving submission. Even though the outcome is poor, we have evolved to switch our minds off under extreme life threat. This is the natural world's use of distractions to finding alternative ways to make life re-emerge, such as returning to the light. It has obvious advantages for the short game, where life flashes in front of you. The mind in a multiple attack is extra vulnerable to mental darkness long before being hit. That is why it is important to build more effective strategies to cope better when facing extreme life threats like a multiple assault. The energy world approach relies on not being mentally available for one's execution. All that needs to be considered is to never connect to the attacker's proposition. To be true to your freedom, you will never slow to connect and lose sight of the path of least resistance. This is the way to play the long game, starting your progression to an exit early, helping you speed up your responses to outrun the attacker's intent. When speed is maintained, you will freely see everything that draws you away from the grab of the assault. The problem presented by the attackers is only in the group's minds. If the situation has no controllable target, then the attackers have the problem to solve. Mental darkness is not a problem in the energy world, as your attention has to always remain fluid. Your actions would look like the scurrying rat, darting around, totally disconnected from the attacker's intent to down the rat. What needs to be understood is the value of maintaining the speed of the one system, which only exists in the energy world. To move unhindered in a sea of resistance, the mind must be clear to operate as close to real time as possible. If you are in the resistance world, you cannot even imagine an exit while standing there anticipating, expecting and hesitating to act on your best instincts. Socially, you are conditioned to fight back for what? Thanks for listening. Yes, there is a part 3 in the pipeline,